I'm Rolene Marks. Welcome to Modiin and Beyond. Join me every Sunday between 3 and 4 on Radio Modiin as we take a look at what's happening in Modiin, Israel, and beyond. I love the smell of peat in the morning. I'm Rolene Marks. This is Modiin and Beyond on Radio Modiin. And you know what it means when I'm armed with these guys, that I am going to be speaking to our resident whiskey expert, Michael Horesh. Michael, it's been a while. I'm so glad to have you back. And nothing warms the cockles of the heart. I said cockles, people, like a wee dram. So we're going to get right into it. What have you brought us today from Whiskey Tasters?
Rolene, it's great to be back here. Great to be back here at Radio Modiin, and thank you again for inviting me. Of course, we're going to talk about happy things here, and that's the point, but we mustn't just forget that there are other things going on in the country, and we got to pay our respects to that. Whiskey Tasters, as you know, as I've explained in the past, has been going around the country bringing Scottish whiskey to homes and high tech around the country. We do tasting evenings. And what we've got here, I want to introduce you to, is the world of peat, the importance of peat in the Scottish whiskey industry. So let's first of all talk about what is peat. And peat is really black gunge that has been under the earth for hundreds of thousands of years and is ostensibly known as a heating fuel. But in the Scottish industry, Scottish whiskey industry, it's known for something else, giving that smoky, pungent smell to whiskey that some people love and some people less than love it.
I mean, you know, I'm a peaty girl. I do loves me my scotch with a dollop of peat, and the aromas coming off these two scotches today, these two whiskies, are absolutely amazing. And personally, I think that if you want to do something for our soldiers, you should host a whiskey tasters evening so that you can drink l'chaim to their safety, to their victories. And we're going to talk about how you do that in a second. But tell us about peat.
Okay. So peat covers about 15% of the land of Scotland. It's found in vast quantities in other countries like Russia and Canada and so on, mainly in sort of wet areas around the world. Now, what we have here, it's are two whiskies from the island of Islay. That's spelt Islay, off the west coast of the Scotland. Next stop, America. Islay has about 9 distilleries. Another 2 or 3 are planned or in the process of being built. Now, if we go to what you have on your left-hand side, which is the darker color whiskey.
Yeah, so some of us need to figure out our left from our right.
Already at this stage.
It's just the aromas that are making me a little bit mabubellet in the morning, a little bit confused.
Now, what we have here is a whiskey from the distillery called Kilchoman, which, if you appreciate the joke, is what people often drink on Purim, but you have to get the joke to understand that. Now, Kilchoman is a relatively new distillery, founded in 2005, 2006.
You just turn your headphones. The one headphone is out, so it's causing a little bit of howl round.
That way?
Yeah, one headphone, one ear thing is around the thing. We're already shikha in the morning here. Take the headphones off.
Take the headphones off.
Turn the earpiece around.
Turn the earpiece around.
There we go.
There we go.
We haven't even imbibed yet, Michael. Look at us.
My apologies, listeners. So we're back to Kilchoman on the island of Islay. Now, they've been going since 2006, as I say, and they are actually essentially a farm. All the barley produced on that farm goes towards the distillery. They use a lot of bourbon casks, but this one we have here, which is called, if you read it, it's called Sanaig, Sanaig. It's actually pronounced Sanig to give it some kind of Gaelic attribute. 46%, 70% Oloroso cask, 30% bourbon cask. Now, first of all, what you do is you bring it up to your nose without smelling it, just slightly tilt the glass, let the smell come up.
I'm getting mastic. I'm getting
Yeah.
tones of mastic.
Go on.
It's a very subtle peat.
Absolutely. Might be even slightly sweet.
Definitely sweet. Very, very strong mastic tones.
Okay. And now the moment you've been waiting for since you got out of bed.
Oh, that's smooth.
And it's absolutely smooth.
Hmm.
Now, for many, excuse me, this is about no more than 6 years old. It doesn't say so on the packaging. We don't know for sure. So it's a relatively young whiskey. Now, what's interesting about this whiskey, the fermentation time, that's when you've added the yeast. Usually in the industry is about 50, 60 hours. In this case, we're about 85 hours. So they've actually gone out of their way to get the best out of the yeast. Now, you should have got some fruits, a lot of berry fruits.
I think the aftertaste is very fruity.
Yeah,
The smell is mastic, but the taste is fruity.
absolutely, absolutely.
It's so smooth. I might have to do another.
Yes, you might have to. I could force your arm. Now, there is a parallel whiskey to this called Machia Bay, but Sanig, as I was saying, this for many people is considered a kind of a whiskey of the year. They've often considered this as a whiskey of the year in, year out. Why? Simply because it combines two or three things together. First of all, as you say, it's smooth. Secondly, the fruits taste more, you'll get different fruits. Third, the flow, the finish is nice, long, without being overwhelming.
It's perfect for a cold morning, I tell you.
And any morning could be cold in order to drink this. Yes, we know.
Listen, it's perfect for a hot morning too. So,
And I would say also that it's readily available. There are whiskey shops in Modiin who frequently stock this at a reasonable price. And if you search around, you will get it on discount from time to time. So for all those reasons, many of the vloggers and so-called experts out there have often considered this as a whiskey of the year. Like it?
it's very Moorish.
Now,
It's very Moorish because it is very subtle and it's very, very smooth. And that finish going down is just everything you need on a morning like this.
Now, the way you measure peat is often measured by what's called ppm, phenol parts per million. And this has about 50 parts per million, which is considered high. And you can actually feel it. I mean, you can smell the peat coming out there. It's very smooth, very smoky, and you can feel it, you can taste it. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put this down, if you can bear to do that for a moment.
Twist my arm.
Twist your arm. And we're going to move over to glass number 2. Now, glass number 2 is also from Islay. As we're going to move over to the northeast coast of Islay, a totally different distillery called Carlisle. One of the workhouses of the Diageo group, probably produces about 7 million litres a year. And what's interesting, don't forget, all we're talking about is yeast, barley, and water. Nothing more, nothing yet less.
I'm trying to figure out what I'm smelling. Yummy. And yet?
And yet, what we're talking about here is the distillery, like many distilleries, gave the cask over to an independent bottler called Claxton, based in South Scotland. They left it in the whiskey in the cask for 9 years, but it was distilled at 50%. Now, don't forget the first one, 46%. This is 50%.
You can definitely feel that extra 4%, that I can tell you.
You can feel that. And tell me, in terms of the strength of the peat, which one's stronger?
I would pick the Kilchoman.
Now, we don't know for sure how much is in the second one, the Keala Isla, the 50%, probably about the same, and yet it's not as smoky, neither on the nose nor on the tongue. Would you agree? You don't have to,
No, you actually can't taste a lot of peat at all.
but it's there. And Odech is it there, as they would say in Scotland.
Slange.
Slange. It's Carl Isla actually means the sound of Isla. In other words, from the sound as in the maritime sound of Isla. It's the distillery is a much older distillery. It's founded in the 1840s or 1850s. So really one of the old style distilleries. It's a lovely, lovely, lovely place to visit. I get off this some spices and lemon.
Definitely spicy. I'm not picking up the lemon, but that could be because I've imbibed quite a bit. So, as one does when there's whiskey in the studio, people.
My point, bringing the two different ones, are first of all, what you have is a beautiful, beautiful whiskey from a relatively young distillery. It doesn't have an age statement on it, and that shouldn't frighten people off. The second offering comes from a well-known distillery, but actually, should we say, manufactured or distributed by an independent bottler. The idea of indies are becoming more and more prevalent and should not frighten people. 9 years, beautiful, smooth. I put this out at a tasting last week. There were 5 whiskies on offer. This, for several people, was number one of the evening.
It is. It's very, very addictive. I think let's take this opportunity to say Slange and L'chaim for our soldiers, for our brave men and women of the IDF. Let's toast to their safety. Let's toast to their success and their victory. And let's also toast to the swift and safe release of our hostages. May they be brought home now.
Thank you. Slante.
Slange L'chaim.
And to your good listeners.
And to our good listeners. I mean, we highly recommend that if you are listening live as we're speaking, maybe grab yourself a dram. You know, let's everybody join in the fun.
If I can just sort of maybe, the aim of whiskey tasters is through whiskey is to bring people together. You meet new people, you discuss things, you explore your senses, because that's what whiskey is all about. There's a lot of chemistry and a lot of biology here, surprisingly. And you just learn things. You learn about history, you learn about the making of a drink, you discuss the whiskeys, and then you get on to discussing other things with the person sitting to your left, or your right, or opposite you. It becomes a wonderful, fun evening getting together, whether it be with friends around the table or colleagues at work or what have you. And that's what Whiskey Tasters is all about.
I think now, with everything that we are going through as a country, and our spirits are, while we're very, very united and we're very high, we're also going through an extreme trauma. And we need some joy in our lives, and we need an opportunity to raise our glasses for all of those who are fighting on our behalf. And I think a whiskey tasting is the perfect way to bring people together in the spirit of joy, because I think we are so needing some joy. It doesn't mean that we're not aware of what's going on around us, but we desperately need to help us get through this trauma, to bring people together. So if people want to book a whiskey tasting, how do they do that?
Well, look me up, Michael Horesh, Horesh. Obviously, look up Whiskey Tasters. We have a very active website, Instagram, and Facebook page, and also on LinkedIn. All the contact details are there, Whiskey Tasters, whiskeytasters.co, or as I say, on LinkedIn, you can find us. Be happy to discuss anything whiskey, just to show you how much of a geek I am.
I was going to ask you, you've brought in a rather fascinating book, Peat and Whiskey.
Peat and Whiskey, The Unbreakable Bond by Mike Billett. It was only released within the last year, 23. And it's a fascinating discussion of peat, how we see this black stuff, and yet it depends what part of the ground you bring it out of, what part of the country you bring it from, whether it's this side of the river, that side of the river, etc., etc. And of course, there's the sustainability issue. Are you going to carry on using peat in the industry? Some people have got alternatives for peat, etc., etc. That's the geek I am. The book itself is fascinating. Guys, come along, join us at Whiskey Tasters.
Well, I cannot wait for people to inundate you with calls, because I think now is the perfect time. I have been to one of Michael's evenings. There are tons of fun. You taste phenomenal whiskies. And let me tell you something. He has the gift of the gab and entertaining people. Michael Horish, our resident whiskey expert. Oy vey, how am I going to get through the rest of the show?
Some more.
I'm going to have some more from Whiskey Tasters. Check him out. And on the other side of this, I am going to be unpacking the International Court of Justice's interim ruling with Advocate Maurice Hirsch. Some of us need to sober up, so we're going to do this after a short music break.
Welcome to Gambia. From Radio City Banjo, the time is 1 o'clock. Please announce the Gambia for the news podcast in English, Wolof and Mandinka. Mbokk yi lii nag mu ngi tudda Sweet Little Mystery groupe yi wet ñoo ko tëgga.
Wait. Sweet Little Mystery. Haven't heard that one for a while. Just a reminder, you are with me, Rolene Marks, on Modiin and Beyond on Radio Modiin. Now, last Friday, on the eve of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the International Court of Justice released its interim rulings. This is following South Africa taking Israel to the ICJ on charges of genocide. And several weeks ago, we unpacked the presentations to the court with Advocate Maurice Hirsch. Advocate Maurice Hirsch, or Lieutenant Colonel Reserve Maurice Hirsch, is the director of the Initiative for Palestinian Authority Accountability and Reform in the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs and the former director of the Military Prosecution for Judea and Samaria. He joins us on the line from Jerusalem. Good morning, Advocate Hirsch. You've just missed Whiskey Hour in studio. So if I sound a little remixed, I blame the whiskey.
Rolene, thank you for having me. I really will hold that against you as an avid fan of my whiskey. I really expected an invitation to such a momentous event.
Well, we do it every month. So next month, the invitation is open and you are most welcome. But let's take a look at that interim ruling by the ICJ. Quite a lot to unpack. So let's break down the ruling. South Africa absolutely crowing with victory. But did they get the desired result that they were looking for?
So I think the answer to that, Rolene, is sadly yes. Obviously, South Africa had asked for the court to order really a complete ceasefire in the fighting as their maximalist request. But really, everything that laid underneath that was answered by the court. Firstly, South Africa claimed that Israel was committing a genocide. That's the goal through which every decision of the court has to be looked at and considered. If the court doesn't believe that a genocide is being committed or that there's any intention on behalf of Israel to commit a genocide, then the court should have decided that it has no jurisdiction, because that is the only very limited jurisdiction of the court. Instead of that, the court decided to say, firstly, that they have jurisdiction, and secondly, to make all of these provisional measures and orders, which really played into the hands of the secondary, but possibly the more important fight of South Africa. On the battleground, obviously, ceasing Israeli military operations would have been an unprecedented success. But look at the success that they're having just with the fact that the court decided, really disturbingly, to issue these provisional orders, which is really saying that, well, the court needs to tell Israel how to behave. Now, that is a despicable thing to say. That is something which should never have been allowed. And this is allowing South Africa and all the Israel haters to say, well, this was a tremendous success. The court didn't reject outright, as it should have, the petition of South Africa, which rarely means, as they argue, it isn't the truth, but truth is a very subjective thing. And really it's absent entirely in the Palestinian narrative, in the world narrative against Israel. That idea of truth is entirely lacking. And so this allows the decision of the court, allows the South Africa and the Israel haters to say, well, even the International Court of Justice found that Israel was potentially committing a genocide. That isn't what the court said, obviously, but it allows them to make that claim, with most people being unable to really understand if the claim is true or is not. But it doesn't matter. The damage, and irreparable damage, has been done to Israel. When the court eventually decides on the merits of the case, as they say, and decide, well, no genocide was committed. There was no proof of a genocide in the first place. It's impossible to prove that Israel had any intention to commit genocide, and therefore the court doesn't have jurisdiction. Well, 3-4 years down the line, when that actually happens, no one will actually give a damn. And obviously that decision will be completely irrelevant. The damage has already been done. And yes, I think South Africa and Iran, backing South Africa, has already achieved its goal of further blackening the name of Israel, further libeling Israel with the official stamp of approval of the despicable International Court of Justice.
Well, IRNA, an Iranian news operation, reporting on Friday morning that South African President Cyril Ramaphosa had spoken to President Raisi. Now, I know that in South Africa, it's a very, very sensitive issue if one talks about the links between Iran and South Africa. But I was reading the ruling in preparation for our chat this morning, and one of the stipulations, and correct me if I'm wrong, it says South Africa is also bound to ensure that no genocide takes place. It also calls on South Africa to have certain obligations. Now, one thing that the South Africans pointedly did not ask for was the release of the hostages, but the court made a point of calling for the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages. Now, in my opinion, that puts the onus on South Africa that we know, no matter what the ANC deny, because we have seen the photographs, we've seen the readouts, we've read the headlines, that they have an open line to internationally recognized terror organization, Hamas, as well as the Iranians. This puts the onus on South Africa to ensure that they put the pressure on those parties to release the hostages. What is your take on that?
I think, Rolene, as much as we'd like to try and find the positive sides of the decision, there are none. South Africa can, unfortunately, with impunity, besmirch Israel, claim that we're committing a genocide, and then once it comes to fulfilling its own obligations, say, well, we've written to Ismail Haniyeh and we've asked for the release of the hostages, and we're waiting for his response. Obviously, we cannot do anything until we receive his response. I say that sarcastically, since one of the opening doors to the jurisdiction of the court is the existence of a dispute between South Africa and Israel that Israel argued didn't exist because South Africa had, albeit, sent all types of diplomatic notes to Israel, but Israel had not yet responded, and South Africa claimed that, well, that's irrelevant. I fear that there will be no real ramifications of any of that really rhetoric of the court and irrelevant rhetoric of the court regarding the hostages. I mean, Hamas wasn't a party to the proceedings. Hamas is the organization that is carrying out and did commit the genocide. And Hamas is a genocidal terrorist organization. They don't give a flying monkey what the 17 judges or the 16 judges in The Hague have to say to them, or for that matter, what South Africa has to tell them how to behave. They don't care about South Africa. South Africa, unfortunately, became useful idiots with no power whatsoever, no influence whatsoever, simply promoting a genocidal propaganda claim. But really, when it comes to that relationship between South Africa and Hamas, do you honestly believe that Hamas gives a damn what Cyril Ramaphosa has to say or what the ANC has to say? Absolutely not.
Well, what is interesting is that the Sunday Times, which is the paper of record in South Africa, reporting as their headline this past Sunday that given what they perceive to be their victory at the ICJ, South Africa will now pursue a case at the ICC. This is the International Criminal Court, which could see individual Israelis charged with genocide or crimes against humanity. This, of course, can have ramifications for South Africa's treaties, like the AGOA Treaty with the United States and others. And South Africa seems to think that despite international pressure, they are the moral conscience of the world. Quite strange of a moral conscience when you consider that most South Africans do not have access to water, food, lodgings, safety, electricity, security. But that's just me, Maurice. Maybe I've imbibed too much whiskey this morning. What do you think that South Africa's chances at the ICC are?
I think the ICC, we have to remember, Rolene, is open to everyone. Whether South Africa approaches the ICC or not is really irrelevant as a country. The question in the ICC is a criminal court, and the question there exists is there actual evidence? And and I'm afraid that on that level, or not afraid, I believe that on that level, the ICJ, as opposed to the ridiculous judges in the ICJ, will clearly come to the understanding that there is no evidence of an intent to commit genocide. And so that's just really a non-starter. Whether South Africa submits the complaint or whether the Palestinian Authority submits the complaint on behalf of Hamas, or whether even Iran could technically submit its own claim and not expect South Africa for whatever payment they received via bailing out, allegedly, the ANC from its debts. And maybe Iran should step up and say, well, since we're the ones pulling the strings of our puppet government in Pretoria, maybe we should be the ones to submit the complaint. And unfortunately, that's really the situation we're in, where the Palestinian Authority, not even South Africa acting on behalf of Iran, the Palestinian Authority, this organization that we constantly fund, is the one that is doggedly chasing us in the ICC for no basis whatsoever as well. And so that's something which South Africa adds no greater intensity to that subject or to that complaint. This idea that because of the judgment handed down by the court, South Africa somehow enhanced its legal standing, it really is a joke to most legal scholars, because when you read the decisions, let's unpack that just a little bit about the decision as well. Whilst in the court of international opinion, the decision was, for most people who don't understand, a great success for South Africa. Any intelligent person who reads the decision realizes that all of the provisional measures ordered by the court were nothing more than requiring Israel to uphold its already standing obligations under international law and under the convention itself. So really, it was a joke. The court just played into this ridiculous narrative presented by South Africa. South Africa is now interpreting this decision of the court without really any legal basis as a great success, which now empowers it to approach the ICC. Really, between us, since no one else is listening, Rolene, we should clearly admit that South Africa has made a joke of itself, unfortunately. It is the joke of the international legal community, and it is really a joke among all of the countries who have any self-respect and really understanding of international law.
Speaking of Iran, and we know now that Iran is using South Africa as its useless idiot puppet and the legal arm of Hamas. The former Minister of Justice and Cabinet Minister Gideon Saar has announced that he is looking at opening a case against Iran at the ICJ. What are our chances there? Because there we do have real language of calls for genocide with ample proof. What do you reckon our chances there are?
Well, so if I was advising the Israeli government, and were they to listen to my calls, I would say that the Israeli government should now initiate claims of genocide against every single country in the world that has ever called for the death or destruction of Israel, against any country in the world that allows for the genocidal claim of from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and really to make a mockery, truly a mockery of the ICJ, because the decision handed down on Friday says that all they need for their preliminary decisions on jurisdiction is the finding some type of basis, albeit very, very thin, in the complaint itself, in order to make all these give all these preliminary measures. So really, Israel should take all of these claims to the court, fill up its docket with 50, 60 different complaints, not only against Iran, but also against Jordan and against Egypt and against Lebanon and against Syria, and really against half of the Middle East, just as a start. Maybe we should add in there, just for the fun of it, some of the Western countries now operating even in Yemen, helping us against the Houthis. England, for example, and just make the claims that they are committing a genocide, and really then see the court. Well, where are you? Where are you standing? Do you really want to make a mockery of yourselves, or is that reserved only for when Israel is in the dock? Is there one rule, one law for the Jews, and another law for the rest of the world? That's something which I think should be a legal strategy adopted by Israel to really expose the true levels of hypocrisy and really mockery that the court has made of itself, opening its doors to anyone and everyone making the most baseless of claims, but then offering those claims as basis for jurisdiction.
Well, one thing is for sure, South Africa are the arch hypocrites taking Israel to the ICJ, when yesterday the ICC announced a case against Sudan for genocide, and just several weeks ago, President Ramaphosa hosting the former leader of the Janjaweed that is responsible for that genocide. South Africa also shielding Putin and Omar al-Bashir, as well as members of the Syrian regime who have committed a gross genocide against the people in Syria, including tens of thousands of Palestinians conveniently forgotten by South Africa. But Advocate Hirsch, we have a very, very vulnerable Jewish community in South Africa at the moment, feeling very isolated and very uncertain about what is going to happen in the country. Any words of encouragement for them?
I think the South African Jews need to realize that it's time to leave, and leave urgently. There is no future in South Africa that is aligned with Iran, that is playing as the usual idiots of Iran. That is an axis of evil which can bring no good to South Africa, and certainly does endanger South Africa's Jewish population. I would say that, and possibly even hesitantly, albeit, say that South Africa is on the precipice of becoming Germany in 1933. This is a very, very, very dangerous position for South African Jewry, and I think that anyone left in South Africa should make urgent plans to leave to wherever they can. Obviously, everyone should be coming to Israel, and that should be something done sooner rather than later, before it becomes too late.
Well, if you want to stand up against the South African government and their legal war against Israel, as well as express your solidarity with the South African Jewish community, please join us at Yad Nebanim on Friday morning at 10 a.m. for a protest. Speakers will include former Chaver Knesset Ruth Wasserman Lande, Nazi hunter Ephraim Zuroff. I will be speaking. Clive Chitters, a bereaved father who lost his son Yaron, killed in action in Gaza during this war, will be speaking as well. Please come, bring your flags, show your solidarity. Thank you to Advocate Maurice Hirsch, who has a standing invitation. Next time we do whiskey, you have an invitation to be in studio. He is a Lieutenant Colonel of the Reserves. Maurice Hirsch is the Director of the Initiative for Palestinian Authority Accountability and Reform in the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and the former director of the Military Prosecution for Judea and Samaria. A big thank you to Michael Koresh of Whiskey Tasters. Book your evening with Whiskey Tasters. Let's drink a l'chaim to the safety and the victory of our proud men and women fighting for us in the Gaza Strip. A big thank you to my engineer, Pe'er Atya, behind the scenes, also imbibing the whiskey. Hey, it's a habit here at Modiin and beyond. Thank you to you, the listeners and viewers. Join me again next Tuesday, 10 o'clock on Radio Modiin. I'm Rolene Marks. Guys, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.
to steal your mind's elation. And little girls from Sweden dream of silver screen quotation. And if you want these kind of dreams, it's Californication. It's the edge of the world in all of Western civilization. The sun may rise in the east, at least it's settled in a final location. It's understood that Hollywood sells Californication. Hey, your Sergeant Mary, while to break the spell of aging. Celebrity skin, is this your chin, or is that war you're waging? Firstborn unicorn, hardcore softcore. Dream of Californication. Dream of Californication. Married the girl, be my fairy to the world, be my very own constellation. A teenage bride with a baby inside, getting high on information. And buy me a star on the boulevard, it's Californication. Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. In Cobain, can you hear the sphere singing songs off station to station? And Alderon's not far away, it's Californication. Born and raised by those that raise control of population. Everybody's been there and I don't need no vacation. Firstborn unicorn, hardcore softcore. Dream of Californication. Dream of Californication. Dream of Californication. Dream of Californication. Destruction leads to a very rough road, but it also breeds creation. An earthquake's out to a girl's guitar, that's just another good vibration. And tidal waves couldn't save the world from Californication. Hey, I Sergeant Mary, while to break the spell of aging. Sicker than the rest, there is no test, but this is what you're craving. Firstborn unicorn.